What's going on, everybody? Sean Daniel with Guitar Control here, and today we're going to learn how to navigate the fretboard with one single major chord arpeggio. And if you've ever kind of heard of arpeggios, but you've never really gotten to grasp the concept of it, this is going to be a great video for you because we're going to break it down super simple. You're going to want to click the link below to grab the tab that goes along with this because we're going to break it down into manageable chunks, and essentially the whole of what we're going to talk about in different ways is going to look like this. Okay, so basically an arpeggio is just a chord that is played one note at a time. It's broken up, okay? And we're gonna start with the people's chord, G major, all right? Now, G major is one of the first chords that you learn. You see it in an infinite number of songs, and it's good to know that that chord is consisted of the notes G, B, and D. It's a triad. There are only 3 notes. Now, it can be kind of daunting thinking about what notes are in which chord, where these notes are, thinking that maybe you have to memorize like locations of all the notes, but it's actually not like that. The cool thing about arpeggios is you learn one note, one location of a note, and then a shape or a pattern will give you the other notes in a chord, all right? So real quick, for this voicing, this particular version of a G major, I've got the 3rd fret of the low E string, the 2nd fret of the A string, open D string, open G string, open B string, and the 3rd fret of the high E string. So, the notes I've got in order from lowest to highest: a G on the E string, a B on the A string, open D, G, B, and a G on the high E string. So a lot of these are doubled up. In fact, you can play a G major just like this, just by hitting the D, G, and B strings. But we want to do it, sometimes we want to do it in order, okay? And the way we're going to do that is we're going to start with the same root note, this 3rd fret on the E string. This is a G. Now we're going to play this chord in a totally different way. Chord version, arpeggio version, all right? So we're going to start with your pointer finger, actually, and we're going to grab that 3rd fret on the E string. Same thing we started on, but now a different finger. And we're actually going to take this to your ring finger, 5th fret on the same string, and then slide to the 7th fret on the same string. So we've got a 3, 5, 7, all right? Now, the notes of this are G, A, and B. And now where does A come from? We actually didn't talk about A. And A is not in a G major chord, but it's in the G major scale, and it helps us kind of get to that B note that we want to make a G major arpeggio. Remember, we're looking for G's, B's, and D's. It's a great way to just hunt for G's, B's, and D's. So G, A, B. And then we're going to go down a string to the A string, 5th fret. All right, this is going to be the D. So this, and this is the same thing as an open D from that chord, okay? So this shape right here is a G major chord played one note at a time with this little transitional A note taking us from a G to a B. I think it's kind of important to add that. You can totally skip that if you want. If you want to go, some people will do that to kind of get that reach in there. G, B, D, that's totally fine, but I just kind of like the sound of grabbing a transitional note into the next note. So we've got G, A, B, D. Now the beautiful thing about this is just a pattern, and this will give you a major arpeggio anytime you want to root it on one of the lower strings, okay? So this is a G chord, a G sharp would just be the next highest note, an A would be the 5th fret, A sharp, B. It's just a totally movable shape. The unfortunate thing about maybe like an open G chord is you can't move it. You move this, and it sounds bad. But the arpeggio can actually be moved everywhere. In fact, we can even move it down the string. So this is going to be the next figure on the tab sheet. So we've got the first, we'll call this 4 notes. Now if we go down a string from where we are, we're on the 5th fret of the A string. If we go straight down a string, we're on the 5th fret of the D string. And the interesting thing about this is an octave of the very G that we started from. In fact, this is the open G string, same note. Again, you'll find it in that open G chord voicing. Now, since we found an octave of the very first one, an octave just being 8 notes away, in the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, same note, higher pitch, we can repeat this shape just starting on this note. So it's actually a good way of kind of like doubling your knowledge of where these notes are, because you can just take the same shape, pointer finger, ring finger, slide 2 frets, back 2 frets down a string. Start it again. Pointer finger, ring finger, slide 2 frets, down a string. Forward and backward is an incredible way to do it. Backwards is almost always going to be harder to do than forwards, just because I think we have kind of like a linear approach to this, kind of moving forward. Once you start flipping that around, it can get a little tricky, but hey, don't worry about it, because eventually you'll become a master of arpeggios, all right? So this is going to take us through 2 full octaves of a G major chord. G, A, B, D, G, A, B, D. Now you would think maybe you could go straight down again and repeat the pattern. But this right here is not a G note. The 7th fret on the B string is actually 1 lower. If we counted to find out what this note is, the 7th fret on the B string, B, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G. The B string is tuned a little bit differently than the rest of them, so we kind of have to compensate for that. And the way we do that is if we start from the same shape, the G we're looking for is going to be a diagonal down. And now once we get this G on the B string, another way to think of this is actually really helpful, is if we think of the 12th fret being the octave, same note. See, if this is an E, this is an E, A, D, D, G, G, B, B. We can actually go backwards because B is pretty close to G if we go backwards. B, B flat, A flat, G. So there is the next G. This is the 8th fret on the B string. So G, A, B, D, G, A, B, D, G, A, B, D. That same shape comes into play again as long as you find a root note. And then we actually jump to the 15th fret on the high E string, which is another G. Okay, that's kind of where we're gonna close it and end it. Because if we stop, it doesn't really feel quite finished. We want that resolution of ending where we started on another G. Or another cool way to do it is to end on a chord. So maybe we go all the way up and then end on that G major chord. The main goal is to start incorporating some of these lead arpeggio lines into things that you can do with chords. Otherwise, it just becomes an exercise. Like, it's great that you can, you know, play all the notes and stuff in arpeggio, but how does that help you musically? You want to start maybe adding these into and between chords sometimes. So let's just focus on that first octave, because I'm going to break it into different figures of different octaves, and then one is the whole exercise. So what I mean by that is the first figure on the sheet that you can click and get below is going to be this. That's octave 1. The second one is octave 2, and the third one is octave 3, and then we've got the whole kind of pattern as one, right? Good way to practice either, any way you want to do it. Whatever keeps you kind of jamming and coming back is the way you want to do it. Now, if we just focus on that first pattern, those notes right there, 1, 2, 3, 4, in those positions, forward and backward, we can kind of incorporate any of these notes as touchstones, or maybe like hot points for stuff that you're playing in a chord. So maybe you're strumming a G chord, and then you can think of, okay, this is that 3rd fret. Now I know that 7th fret, or a ring finger and a 2 fret slide away from the root note, is a B. I can start incorporating that into my chords. And I'm really just kind of moving in places where that arpeggio has taught me notes in a G chord are going to be. Even if I'm playing a different chord, and maybe I'm going into a G chord, so maybe I have a progression that's like a C to a G. Now this C lines my ring finger up with the 3rd fret on the A string. I could easily get into that 5th fret, which I know can lead me back to a G. So maybe a C chord. And I'm just kind of making transitional elements. You can kind of jump into them from you can abandon the chord and kind of get into any other piece of this arpeggio, even if you want to go to the top. It's just a good way to kind of start seeing the fretboard in different ways. I like maybe even taking the 2nd octave and just kind of focusing on that. So the 5th fret on the D string is where that octave G was we talked about. Right there. Bum, 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 bum. Even, let's take the last 2 notes. So here's the G, A, B, and D. Let's think of just these. The 9th fret of the D string to the 7th fret of the G string, okay? Maybe I can go from here. G chord. And then I'm kind of playing this as almost a new chord. But in my head, I didn't think of this as a chord. I thought of this as part of this arpeggio that I'm combining. And then everything is movable. So maybe I want to do 2 frets higher than a G. What was that again? G, G sharp, A. I can do the same thing with the A. So remember, I had this hot point of getting into that kind of new shape here from a G. 2 frets higher than a G is the A. I can play A major. So they're totally movable shapes, which is a huge advantage that arpeggios have over open chords. So if you're just starting to maybe kind of get yourself into lead playing, arpeggios are definitely the way to do it. And fretboard spanning arpeggios are the way to kind of get into it, to really just familiarize yourself with how these patterns and stuff move throughout the fretboard. And we definitely have more arpeggio videos to come, so stay tuned. So if you liked the lesson, please let us know by subscribing, clicking the like button, and commenting, and definitely click on any of these videos around me because we have a lot more lessons that are kind of in the same vein for myself and other great instructors. So thanks a lot.